If you have open fielded in the last 3 to 6 months in Rise of Kingdoms, then you would know that the open field commander king right now, at least one of them, is Liu Che. He is a very, very, very strong commander, and one of his most common pairings is actually Gorgo, a garrison commander, which might be a little odd if you go based on Rise of Kingdoms history. Now, this combination is generally run with the Gorgo primary and Liu Che secondary, but as of recently, there's kind of been this wave that the Liu Che primary might be better. So we're going to go in and deep dive today as to what combination is actually better. We did a ton of testing on this topic. It took me it took me 2 hours alone to test, another many hours to go through all the results, and we're going to break it all down for you in this video. So we're going to break it up into 5 parts, okay? We've got quick skill review. You guys know the skills, you guys have been playing the game, but just very brief review. Next, we're going to go into why Liu primary might work and why Gorgo primary might work. Both of them have synergies in their own respective ways. Next, we're going to go over the methods of testing. So how did I test these commanders? How did I find my results? Then we're going to go through the results and do a result review. So I'll pull up the document that I have, show all the results that I came up with, and then we will go ahead and make our conclusions after that. So it's going to be a long video, guys, so strap in. Okay, so as promised, we're going to go over the Gorgo and Liu Che kits. So we'll start off with Gorgo since I said her name first. Anyway, she is a infantry, garrison, and defense commander. She has a 900 rage cost on her active skill, and what's kind of unique here is her active skill actually doesn't go off the turn it activates. So the damage, I mean, doesn't go off the turn it activates. So what happens is she uses her active skill, she gains all of her buffs like the normal attack damage, the bonus counter attack damage, and then when she has those buffs, she launches her 2300 damage factor. So this actually is a little bit more than 2300 damage factor. It's more like, I don't know, you add 230 to it, so 2530 as a single target active damage factor on a 900 rage requirement. So Gorgo is really good. She has been really good and the staple in the garrison for a long time. And she also has a great debuff here that doesn't require to be in the garrison. So 40% attack, okay, that's pretty standard. But the 10% chance to make the target take 30% more normal damage, really good when you're swarming things, really good when you're in a 1v1, really good when you're about to use your active skill. Next up, we've got a garrison commander skill. So this is only while serving as a garrison. Doesn't have any relevance for the open field, but still pretty nice, 30% health and a little bit of smite on an instant proc. And then lastly, we have another normal damage buff to itself, and this is whenever you deal smite damage, you deal 30% more normal damage for 3 seconds, which is also nice because you've got the Gorgo firing off its active skill, and then if you've got the Liu Che secondary, maybe it does a little bit of work there and some synergy. And then the expertise, not great for open field, but it is nice in a garrison. And I guess if you are being targeted in the open field, this works. When you are hit and below 50% health, you have a chance to gain a little bit of shield and do a little bit of a debuff. Next up, we've got Liu Che, and Liu Che is, in my opinion, the best open field commander in Rise of Kingdoms. It's not that his kit is necessarily that insane, it's just the fact that he is the first infantry commander to deal a 5-target AoE, and that AoE is smite damage. And why is smite damage so much better, in my opinion, anyway, than skill damage? Well, that's because smite damage, there's not much in the game currently that counters smite damage, right? Every commander in every single talent tree, right? Let's just go here. Maybe this is a bad example. This is deal skill damage. Oh no, this takes, so, you know, every single commander in every single tree has some sort of skill damage reduction. So this commander takes less skill damage here. If we go to calves, right? This command, oh, okay. I was like, what is my cap set? Anyway, this commander takes 3% less skill damage when you take this shield. And obviously the support tree, right, is very skill damage mitigation reliant. So All those talents do absolutely nothing against Liu Che's active skill. Makes him very, very strong, makes his AoE very, very potent. But besides that, he inflicts a little bit of slow and has a ton of march speed and takes less, of course, skill damage. So he's countering all those skill damage commanders out there and gets a little bit more defense. This one requires you to be attacking another troop on the map. So if you are hitting a garrison, this isn't necessarily that great, but at the same time, you know, usually you're hitting people in the open field. You get like 20% attack and a little bit of an instant proc. And then lastly, while you're on the map, so not in the garrison, you deal 10% more normal damage. And when you deal smite damage, so when your active skill pops off or when that little instant proc pops off, you do get a 10% less damage done by your enemy as a debuff. And then this is where the real kicker is. And there's another video that I believe OmniArc came out with that showed the power of this ability. Now, while I kind of figured something like that might work because I was looking at, you know, Liu Che's battle results, and they were just insane. He was getting his skills off faster than any other commander with 1,000 skill requirement, and that is because you also get the bonus rage when this procs. So you should know this was popularized by, I believe it was Wick Gaming, that when you launch a basic attack, you gain 86 extra rage. And I don't want to get on this huge tangent, but long story short, when this procs, you also get an extra 86 more rage. So that is why the rage engine on Liu Che is so crazy. So in addition to the extra rage, you get things proccing like war drums, you get things proccing like rings, any instant procs. So if you pair this commander with Alex, it's really good. Anyway, this is not a Liu Che guide. I just wanted to go over that so you guys are aware. Now, a quick review of why each commander would be good as a primary. And I think it's pretty obvious for Liu Che. The synergy here all comes from the attack tree. The attack talent tree is very good for normal damage commanders because of things like effortless, but mainly because of things like this martial mastery. So this is basically 3 talent points for 6% all damage. You are just coming in here, taking no downside of 3% less skill damage done, and getting all the upside of the 6% essentially all damage. Now, this little point in the versatility tree, 0.5 attack versus this 0.5 counterattack damage, I generally just go for the attack because it affects my active skills. Ideally, I'm not getting targeted too much, but whatever. It's 1 point. This is generally the tree that you should be running if you're using Liu as a primary. Effortless, one of the best talents in the game, basically adds up to, I believe, 10%. Yeah, 10% all damage. If you've been in combat for, it is 30 seconds because you start the combat with 2.5% all damage, and then you end up with 10% all damage after being in combat for 30 seconds. Very good, especially if you're good at keeping your marches alive. And then fight to the death is just generally good. It is a bonus upside of 3% all damage. You just generally want to take this whenever you are using the attack tree. And then standard inf tree, I think you always want the march speed for anything open field. But yeah. Now, that is really the only upside to using Liu as the primary. The attack tree is basically so insane. You're getting essentially, what did I say, 6 plus 3% plus 10%. So you're getting essentially 19% all damage swing from using the attack tree. That's crazy. That is really good. But the Gorgo synergies come a little more obvious because you just kind of look at the active skill and you say, wait, so once this goes off, I'm boosting my normal damage, and it has a lower skill rage requirement. Sorry. So essentially, that's what it is. This skill will go off about 1 turn sooner than if you are using the Liu Che as the primary. And also, while you use this as the primary, you will get the buff of 10% more normal damage on your active skill from Liu Che and from Gorgo, which is quite nice. The talents are pretty standard, I'd say, for open field. You just go full inf tree here, and you get as much march speed as you can because Gorgo has no march speed on her kit. So as far as the synergies go, that's about it. Now, why don't we hop into the testing methods because there were a lot of them. So if you watch my last testing video, which was the Herman Prime video, which I will link right above me, then you'll know that I like to do a little bit of unorthodox testing. I think that the day and age of just doing 1v1 tests or just straight 5v5 tests are kind of outdated. I think that there are better ways that you can prove which commander is better and in what case scenario. And I think that the sum of all of these results, 1v1, 5v5, AoE testing, all this is really how you can tell what commander is better. So that's what we've done today. The first thing that we did is standard 1v1 testing. All right, so we took Gorgo Liu and we paired it against other common field marches. So we did Nevsky Joan, we did Zhuge Liang with Herman, and we did Guan and Skippy. That being said, I know that Nevsky Joan isn't some crazy strong 1v1 march. I know that Guan Skippy isn't crazy strong 1v1 march, but that is what you're going to be hitting in the open field. So we decided to test that. I will also want to add in that we did this with full gear. So if I go into my Liu, this is not the gear that I was running. I was actually running this set. So pretty decent gear, right? I mean, I've got iconic 4s, mostly crit, and I was also dueling against somebody else who had a very similar gear setup and layout to me. We did have no boost to the 5 or 10% defense token, but we did use the city theme, and we are both VIP 18. So we had very, very, very even playing fields. Anyway, back to the actual testing we did. So we did the 1v1 attempts against those 3 marches. We then did something called a total output test. And I'll have it up here on the screen, but this is essentially when you are not getting hit and you are just dealing as much damage as possible while hitting one target. So in this case scenario, we were hitting a Boudica with YSG because it had no reactionary debuffs, and it was just kind of an easy target. And we just basically would run it into this Boudica Zhuge until the Boudica would die. We did things like we took the time, how long it took. We calculated the number of Sev wounds it dealt and the Sev wounds it received. We then ran this test again with the total output test, but total output when targeted. So this is when the Boudica was fighting back. Again, we chose the Boudica YSG, kind of on accident, but it worked out because the Boudica YSG doesn't have any debuffs, so it was really able to show its full range of motion. And then last but not least, we did the 5v5 testing. So we used the standard open field pairings, fully geared out. So we had Gorgo with Liu Che, we had Guan with Skippy, Zhuge Liang with Herman, we had Nevsky with Joan, and then we had Huku Bing with William. Now, he always used the same marches, right? We wanted a very stable thing to test against, but I swapped between the Gorgo Liu Che and then the Liu Che with Gorgo. And we got some crazy test results. So without stalling too much, this is probably what you're here for. I don't mean to stall. We're going to dive in to exactly what happened. So long story short, I took all of these test results, everything that you see here on the screen right now in my favorites, and I compiled them into one Google Doc. Yes, it was pretty insane. It took me a lot of time, but here it is. Here it is. And I understand that my camera is blocking some of the verbiage. I will go ahead and scroll down for you so that you can see it. But we're basically just going to read through these, and I'm going to help you figure out what I'm trying to explain, all right? Because I know that if I'm just going to ramble, it's going to sound confusing, so I'm going to be walking myself through it while I walk you guys through it. So right here on the left, we've got the Gorgo Liu 1v1 attempts. You can see that we had the commander verse, the Sev wounds that it dealt, the Sev wounds that it receives, and then we took the differential of the two, and then we took the average. So the average is kind of what you're looking for, and on average, the Gorgo Liu did better, actually pretty significantly, than the Liu Gorgo in the 1v1s. So we had a 4,000 differential, give or take, versus the Nevsky Joan. We had the 2.1 differential with the ZL and Herman, and we had the 14.3 against the Guan Skippy. Guan Skippy is not a dual march, but everybody knows that. All right. Kind of on average, winning every single trade against those marches. That being said, there is some high variance, right? So we actually won the first duel against Nevsky Joan by 13,000 sevs, which is crazy, and then we lost the next one. So again, we used things like Horn, we used things like Ring. There's obviously some randomness in the Liu Che not fourth skill, but expertise with the rage gain. So there's a lot of factors going into this, which is why we tried to do as many tests as we could in the limited time that we had, which is crazy because we had 2 whole arcs to do it. But regardless. And then if I scroll down here, we had the Liu and Gorgo attempt. So you can actually see the differential average is negative for 2 of them and then still positive against Guan with Skippy. The ones that I have highlighted in red are generally meaning that it performed worse than the latter. So if it's green, that means it did better than its counterpart, meaning in this case, Gorgo Liu did better than the Liu Gorgo. And if it's red, vice versa, right? So just want to put that out there. All right, then we have the Nevsky Joan averaging about minus 3,000. We had an even worse trade against the Zhuge with Herman, and then obviously we did crush the Guanskippy again, even with the Liu as the primary. I do just want to say that I'm not saying that Nevsky Joan is a better 1v1 march into infantry than than Zia with Herman. The truth is, this guy's a cav main, so he had his best set on his Nevsky Joan. Makes sense. Okay. Anyway, you guys should know that these are full gears. There is going to be some randomness. And now we have the total output test, which again, I'll put on the screen above as I kind of play this. But for the total output test for the Liu Gorgo and the Gorgo Liu, we actually had the Liu coming out in front. So the Liu did a ton of damage when not being targeted. But if we come over to this right side, and this is where all these numbers are going to start being a little funky, so I apologize in advance, but I'm going to do my best to explain it. So on the left here, we have the time, so the amount of time that it took to kill its target. And a suggestion that I had in one of my last videos is, why don't you actually take the DPS of the march that you're testing? And this is a very common phrase, usually coming from MMOs. I used to play World of Warcraft back in the day. You know, your DPS, your HPS, damage per second, heals per second, things like that. And so I kind of converted this into SPS, which is sevs per second. All right, it's a little bit difficult, but when you see SPS, that is what I'm talking about. And when you see STPS, that is sevs taken per second. Okay, I've got a little key up here so you can see it, but just in case you are having some trouble remembering. So the average time of the Gorgo Liu, oddly, was a little bit less than the Liu Gorgo, meaning it killed its target faster on average. Now, granted, we only did 4 attempts, so there is a little bit of randomness, all right? But basically that meant that it had less time to do damage, which might explain why the Liu Gorgo actually did more damage pretty significantly. But this is where we go into what is the actual damage per second. So if we look at the damage per second of the Gorgo and Liu Che, it did less damage per second than the Liu Gorgo. So right now, everything's kind of pointing towards the Liu Gorgo doing a lot more damage. But when you come down to the damage taken per second, and this is where you're getting into the actual trade ratio, then the Gorgo took a significantly less amount of damage than the Liu Che did as the primary. And over here on the right side, this is basically the trade ratio. So on a per second basis, because there is everything going on in all these combats, we broke it down by per second. So what is happening every single turn for your Gorgo and Liu Che? And basically we came up with the average trade with your Gorgo and your Liu Che as the secondary, your Gorgo primary, Liu Che as the secondary, is 13.315 average trade ratio per second. I know these acronyms are terrible. This is just what I put in there, so I apologize. So this was actually slightly better than the Liu Che Gorgo when not being targeted. Okay, so you can see in my note down here, the comparison notes, I did the math for the percent increase, and basically you had a 2.47% better performance with the Gorgo Liu as the primary. So how often do you play in the open field and not be targeted in the open field, right? So that's kind of what we wanted to know. So next we did the same test while being targeted and hit back. So when we go ahead and we compare these results, we had the Sev wound differential average in favor pretty significantly by the Gorgo Liu Che. And that, I think, makes a lot of sense considering the fact that Gorgo is a lot more tanky than maybe something like the Liu Che primary is. Another thing, the average time to kill for the Liu Che was almost 5 seconds less. 5 seconds, which means that if you're trying to kill your target and get killed, well, you know what? Liu Che Gorgo is the way to go. If you like using YSG in the field, then you'll like using Liu Che with Gorgo. And when we go into average sevs per second, shouldn't be any surprise, the Liu Che with the primary did more damage per second than the Gorgo again, but when it was talking about sevs taken per second, the Gorgo did pretty significantly better than the Liu Che. So when we come over here and we actually see our average trade ratio per second, we saw that even when targeted, the Gorgo Liu Che did pretty significantly better than the Liu Che Gorgo at 2.882 average trade ratio per second, and the Liu Che with Gorgo did a 2.729 average trade ratio per second. And when we came down here and saw the comparison notes, right, the math comes out to be a 5.6% better trade when using the Gorgo and Liu. So all that being said, that's non-practical situations. That's as close to a simulation as possible without just using the Rock Battle simulator, which I believe OmniArc is a big fan of. I personally like to use things in the field or in Arc for my testing. So this is where we had the 5v5 tests. And, you know, again, I'll show this on screen, but this is very random, I'd say. A lot of this is based on the positioning and how your marches swing. So the thing that we tried to make sure of is that we targeted the exact same order every single time. So you'll see above that we had the standard open field priority targeting. This means that we targeted what we agreed on would be the highest priority target. So Zhuge Liang first, Guan Yu second, we had Hua with William third, we had Nevsky with Joan fourth, and then we had Gorgo with Liu Che last. And we did 4 1v1s, and I won them all. And basically the Sev wound average differential was about 53,854 Sev wounds in my favor. So how I did this, I just went through all the battle reports. I totaled my Sevs dealt and my Sev received, and I got my differentials, and then I averaged them up. Then we did a little different testing. We actually tried to target the Gorgo with Liu Che first in these test results. I didn't think that this was super practical because we did a lot less testing or rounds with this one. Basically, you should never target the Gorgo Liu Che because it's tanky and it's got a lot of normal attack damage. Like, you're going to be much better off getting the Zhuge or the Guan out of the way first. But we did 2 test results of this one. I ended up winning the first one at 49,000 Sevs, but this last one, obviously you can see I made a note here. We had slightly incorrect attack order. I think he hit my my Guan Yu or something second, and I hit a Zhuge. It was a little different, so there was some variable. Anyway, I still counted it towards the average because it did come into practice. So I did lose this. This was a 5v5 that I lost, and then it came up with the average of 13,102 in my favor. Now, that being said, I did the cumulative average, and no, I didn't just average this and this. What I did was I averaged all of these together here, and then I came up with this number. So cumulative average of all testing that I did with the Gorgo and Liu Che primary, I won by 32,770 Sevs. Now, if we dive into the Liu Gorgo, I'm not going to repeat everything and read it off to you, but you can see that the very first 2 runs that we did, the 5v5s that we did, I lost pretty handily on the second one, but I made another note because this was the slightly incorrect attack order. I think this is still when we were supposed to be targeting the Zhuge Liang first, and I think he accidentally hit my Liu Che instead and then swapped to the Zhuge. Either way, I still averaged it because it is kind of what would happen in the open field anyway based on positioning. So I went ahead and threw it in the average, and then I added in my 2 other attempts, which I did win, coming out to a slight win, I guess, for your average margin of victory at 1,012. And then, oddly enough, this just kind of shows the randomness, I guess, in 5v5 testing. We did the Liu Gorgo, which you would think would be a lot less prickly and a lot more glass cannony, and we targeted that first, and I won both of those by a pretty significant margin, and we actually did better than when they targeted my Gorgo first. But either way, we ended up coming out with a total average win of about 12,709 Sev wounds positive in my favor. So again, the Gorgo primary came out on top. So what does all this stuff actually mean, and how do I put what I've learned here into practice in the field? Which one's better, Gorgo or Liu primary? So just going left to right, we're going to keep a little score. We have, first of all, the 1v1 attempts. Well, the Gorgo Liu did better on average. Pretty simple. Almost unanimously across the board. Actually, not almost, it did unanimously across the board. And then the Gorgo Liu different total output tests. We had the Gorgo coming in first only slightly, but it having a better trade ratio overall. Now, I do want to have a little bit of a note here that the Liu Gorgo did a lot more damage. So if you are looking for more glass cannon but worse trades, the Liu Gorgo is a good option. It's still very, very, very strong. But basically, the Gorgo Liu won this, so it's 2-0 now. Now, the total output when it's being targeted, well, this one was a lot less close, oddly enough, and we had another victory for the Gorgo Liu. And then lastly, we go to the 5v5 results, and we had our final resounding victory for Gorgo Liu as the best performing combination in a final score of 4-0. So what does this actually mean? And if we pop back into game here, so oh, my gatherers aren't out. That's disgusting. Anyway, if we think, what am I actually going to run in the field? I think it is pretty safe to say that Gorgo primary is actually better. I think that the reduced rage cost plus the buff when you're using the active skill is just a little too good. And while the attack tree is very nice, you can't really stop stating how this is very, very important for the trade ratio of any commander with the defense tree. You get an absolute boatload of defense, you get a boatload of skill damage taken reduction, and damage reduction, which is just like very nice. And obviously, you know, this skill damage taken doesn't do anything in the Gorgo Liu duels that we're doing, but this will be there in practice. And so I think that one avenue, again, as I mentioned earlier, if you do want to do more damage but have slightly worse trades, again, we were talking about a 2.5 to like a 5.5 difference in your average trade percentage, then use the Liu and you'll kill stuff faster. Maybe in your Arc of Osiris matches, you know, the tree here I think has a little bit more march speed if I don't misremember, so you might actually be able to march a little bit faster with the Liu Che. Actually, I think the defense tree has 6% march speed too, so maybe it's about the same. But either way, if you want to do more damage, go back to your structure, you know, go back out, then use the Liu Che primary. I think that's great. But overall, I do strongly now firmly believe that Gorgo is the proper primary in this combination. Oh gosh, so thank you. I know it was a long video for something that might actually be very, very simple to understand and what you might have already known. But I know that there are a lot of people out there who were asking me this question, which one's actually better? And I took it upon myself to find the answer. So I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something. Let me know if you would like to suggest anything as far as how my results are taken, how my testing is done. I'm always open for constructive criticism. I don't want people telling me, oh, you use gear, that's bad. That doesn't tell me anything, right? Like, I did no gear test last time. I'm doing gear test this time because I think that including gear includes some of the variables that you'll see in the open field. Nothing is just standard vanilla versus vanilla commanders anymore. You've got armaments, you've got rings, you've got horns, you've got buffs nearby, right? All this stuff. So anyway, just please, I'd love to hear your feedback. And this took me a lot of time to make, so I really do hope that you enjoyed it and you learned something. So thank you guys, and I'll see you guys around in the next one. Peace. And before I say goodbye, I just want to give a real big thank you, really big thank you for sacrificing more than 2 hours out of your day to help me do all this testing. I bring bad luck, great guy, he's in my kingdom. Cool. All right, bye.